What is a web service? This is a very important term that you need to know. You need to know the difference between API and web service. So let's take a look. What is a web service? Well, it's pretty simple actually. Let's just look at the two terms. First is the term web. What does web mean? You probably know what the web is. It's just the internet or network, right? The second word is service. Service is just a shorthand way of saying API. So if you put the two words together, a web service is just an API that uses the web or the internet. Not all APIs use the web. Those that don't use the web are obviously not web services, and those that do are web services. So all web services are APIs, but all APIs are not necessarily web services. Only if the API uses the web is it a web service. Pretty simple, right? Not all APIs use the web. I'll give you an example. A lot of definitions for APIs say, oh, it's software to software. That's not true. I'll give you an example. I used to work on something called Oracle Apps. Now it's called Oracle EBS. And within Oracle EBS application, they would have programs calling other programs within the same application. It wouldn't go over the network. It would go on within the same application. And some of these APIs were called open. In other words, if I was developing, I could use them. And some of them were closed. In other words, I could not use them. Okay, so don't think that all APIs have to be open or all APIs have to use the web. But this course, a lot of this course is about web services and their components and technologies. So let's take a look at those components. Web services use, because it goes over the internet, XML or JSON to format data to go over the internet. In other words, when you're sending data over the internet, you have to use a certain format to send it over. You can't just use Notepad or Word or something like that. You have to use a certain format so that it can be sent over the network. And also, when sending over to the network, you have to use some kind of a protocol, right? So those protocols are REST, SOAP, or XML RPC. XML, JSON, REST, SOAP, XML, RPC will be explained to you in full later on in this course. But for this particular slide, I want you to understand what a web service is. Again, a web service is just an API that uses the web. You have now completed the first section of this course. What is an API? Now you know what an API is, and you also know what a web service is. If you like this course, please give it 5 stars. If you don't like this course, if you have an issue with this course, let me know. Don't give a rating just yet. See how I can improve your experience so you get a 5-star experience. If you give this course 5 stars, that's saying this is a good course and other people can take this course, which is important because we need lots of API experts out there. I'm real excited. Let's keep going. And now we're going to start getting into the details of APIs. Let's go over the basics of how APIs work again. We have a request made from something, say your computer or cell phone, to a program on a computer. We don't know where the computer is located. And the response is made with what is requested. This is the basics of how APIs work. Request made to a program, program responds with what we requested. For example, www.google.com sent to a Google computer, comes back with the Google web page. This is very simple. We need to know more details in this. When this is done over the internet, that is when an API is done over the internet, then what is it? Do you remember? It's a web service. So all web services are APIs, but not all APIs are web services. That is, not all APIs use the internet. When talking about APIs, though, people are generally talking about web services, calling APIs over the internet. And if we're calling APIs over the internet, we call this computer using something called HTTP, or Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It also sends back us a response in HTTP. So we have to know what HTTP is to understand web services and the details of how APIs work. So let's get into HTTP. What is HTTP? First, let's go over the term. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. What does this mean? What's hypertext? Let's look at the first term. Well, let's look at regular text. What is regular text? Let's put in www.google.com. That's regular text. What does regular text do? Nothing, right? It's just text. What makes this special? HTTP makes it special. It turns it into hypertext, meaning that this text can go somewhere else. Hypertext, hyper to somewhere else. So when you put in www.google.com into your search engine, Internet Explorer, or Firefox, or Chrome browser, then it automatically starts it with HTTP or HTTPS. S just means extra security encryption. Same thing, just extra security. This thing enables this to go to a Google computer. It makes this hypertext. How it's done is the transfer protocol. That specifies how it's done. So we have to go over the hypertext transfer protocol to understand behind the scenes what's happening here and to understand web services. So let's get into HTTP. First, let's get into the request part of it. Like when we do, this is a computer, and we're sending over a request using HTTP. What parts are in the HTTP? Sent to a computer somewhere. Computer.